Welcome to So-and-So, brought to you by Bernina, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is costume designer and wardrobe freelancer Jessica Cronin. She was born in the U.S. and raised in Singapore and England. She has a BA in art history from the Drew University and an MFA in costume design from Carnegie Mellon University. She's worked in film and television and in the fashion industry doing myriad key design and creation jobs. Her film and TV credits include Gotham Knights, Dead to Me, A League of Their Own 2022, Gossip Girl, and more. She also has done styling for numerous print and commercial campaigns. Additionally, she has great experience with theatrical costume design and leveraging her talents nationwide. You can find her somewhere between New York City, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, and LA. Jessica Cronin, welcome to So-and-So.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, this is wonderful. And you're in the Atlanta area today, so we can kind of pinpoint you on the map.
Yes. Yeah. I'm enjoying the beautiful fall weather down here.
Oh my goodness, it is just a gift everywhere. The colors are vibrant, and
I know.
it's wonderful. There's so much to talk to you about, so I'm going to jump in and ask you our leadoff question. When did you begin to sew, and who is your inspiration?
Well, I wrote about this a little bit on the Bernina We All Sew blog, but I got into sewing in two capacities. So first was through my great-grandmother, who worked as a living historian at Old Sturbridge Village up in Massachusetts. And I would do the summer programs up there, and I remember her teaching me how to hand sew using the 1830 sewing samplers. So I would sit and sew or dye yarn, and the village is a wonderful place where you can go and learn all the historical techniques for these things. And she was really the one that ignited in me a love for historical sewing and the art of hand sewing. And then my mother saw that I was really interested in it and sewing in general. And so she signed me up for a children's sewing class where I remember it specifically. I had to make a drawstring bag, and I picked this like neon cat print. I can still see it in my head, and I wish I still had that bag. But I do remember sitting down at the sewing machine for the first time and being like really intimidated. And then after these classes, coming out feeling very empowered and like, oh, I just created something out of thin air. So that's really kind of how I started. And my family has just kind of sort of cultivated that love. And anytime I see my great aunts, they're like, here's an extra sewing pattern, or here's some more sewing supplies. So it's kind of wonderful to have that in the family. Yeah.
You mentioned historical sewing. What is that?
So I would countenance that sort of as utilizing historical techniques, or like sewing by hand, or sewing utilizing like before the sewing machine. Hand sewing really is what I kind of denote that as being historical sewing, or working on a historical garment. Like, for example, my great grandmother was making a bonnet, and so you're doing this by hand, doing the little hand stitches. It's just beautiful. So yeah, that's sort of what I constitute hand sewing, historical sewing.
Okay. Now we learned in introducing you that you were born here in the States, but you were raised in Singapore and England. And that's kind of interesting. So tell us why your childhood took you to these places and how it could have affected how you see things today.
Oh, yeah. I had a very unique childhood. So my family left the country in around 97 to move to Singapore. And then we moved to England around 2000 to move to England. And mainly it was because of my dad's job that brought us around. He works in human resources. And it was sort of the time for growing the expat community, the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful. I mean, it can be difficult moving around often. And I have two younger brothers, and we moved almost every, like, I would say 3 to 5 years. But it really offered us incredibly unique experiences growing up. My parents are avid travelers, and they love history, and they love to experience other cultures. And so from a very young age, they were able to sort of instill that in us and really give us hands-on education. I personally think it's really important to kind of get outside of your own bubble, and it
Mm.
helps you experience, different foods, cultural practices, from dancing, architecture, seeing, different types of clothing and just how people live their lives. But then at the same time, it showcases how similar we all are.
Mhm.
And I think that's like super magical. So, it was a very, like I said, unique childhood. Moving around a lot was hard, being the new kid all the time. But at the same time, the toss up was getting to travel so much as a kid and really,
Mhm.
really having my eyes open to the world at large, which I would never change. Yeah, it was like an amazing childhood in that aspect. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you mentioned your childhood. I wanna talk about when you were a little girl. You started dancing at the age of 3, but then had to have Harrington Rod surgery for scoliosis. And, this changed the course of your life and set you on the road to where you are today. Would you share this experience with us?
Of course. Yeah, I do kind of I'll post a little bit about this online, but um, I was a dancer. My mom put me in ballet at 3, and I did tap, jazz, ballet. When we moved to England, I did Bollywood, and I did tap, all that stuff. I had a real like appetite for it. I wanted to be a ballet dancer, and I ended up getting one of those school tests where they kind of check your spine, and the scoliosis is hereditary. So eventually it got worse with my growth spurt, and I had to have the Harrington Rod surgery when I was 14. But before that, I had to wear a Boston brace, which is like a plastic corset. It's a correctional corset. And usually they tend to do this before offering surgery as an option. Um, it was a lot to deal with as a 13-year-old. You're going through all these different body changes already, and then now you have to wear this plastic brace. And I had to wear mine 23 hours out of the day. I could only take it off when I was showering. And I would say it's a pretty horrible age to kind of go through all of that, but at the same time, character building in a way. And it really made me in focus on physical image and my own physical image, if that makes sense. I had to buy all new clothes to fit over the brace. I really wanted to hide myself. I wanted to hide the brace itself, which was impossible because it was just this chunk of plastic. And it did affect how I moved, how I viewed my body. And I went from being like, a dancer where my body was so expressive to being very restricted and restrained. And my mom could kind of see how that was really affecting me mentally. And I remember one day she presented me with this book, and it's so specific, but it's the Dita Von Teese Burlesque and the Art of Tease book, which had wonderful information about corsets, but also about body confidence. And my world sort of shifted in that
Hmm.
space reading that book. I became so interested in historical corsetry and how we as humans across all cultures have modified or tried to control the body. And I'm still obsessed with corsetry to
Hmm.
this day. So it really had a very lasting effect on me. And ultimately the brace didn't work. My scoliosis was very advanced. I had an S curve. I think my ribs were twisting to the right and my hips were twisting to the left. And it was like a 54 and 56-degree curve. So it was
Mhm.
very advanced, very severe. And really, the only option at that point was to have the surgery to correct it. And that was a lot to go through, but at the end of the day, it saved my life, and it really just kind of became the thing that did transition me. I was like, well, no longer can I be a ballet dancer. um,
Mhm.
but I think things have changed nowadays. But back in the early 2000s, I had never heard of a dancer who had the Harrington Rod surgery. So in my mind, I was like, oh, it's not going to happen for me. How can I shift what I love into something else? And I always loved the part of performing with the recitals and getting to put up the costumes on and it all coming to life. And my mom always made my ballet costumes, so I had this great connection already to the clothing. So in my mind, I was like, that's it. I'll be a fashion designer. I'll do costumes, and how a 14-year-old's mind shifts, and so that's sort of how that came on naturally as a progression of really a response to that kind of surgery. Yeah. Yeah.
Does this have any effect on how you're able to move today?
It does in a way. I can't bend my back. So I feel like I'm consistently in like a corseted space where my spine doesn't bend the same way as other people's. My surgery goes sort of from like the clavicle down to my lower spine. So it's pretty much the whole spine is fused together.
Hmm.
So I'm good with Pilates. I'm good with yoga. I actually did continue dancing through college and never went professional, but was still able and still like very luckily able to continue dancing and, walking around. And um, I think it's interesting too, sometimes when we get into the fitting rooms, not all disabilities are seen. You could have a knee surgery and not be able to put pants on correctly. You could have arthritis and not be able to do buttons. So it has made me incredibly sensitive to how people move and sort of exist within their bodies. So that's given me a great perspective. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
At one point, Jessica, you worked in fast fashion and you called it
Yes.
horrendous.
Oh,
Why?
yeah.
Why?
Oh, poor fast fashion is truly terrible. It's I would say to start it all off, a great documentary if anyone is really interested in learning about how the fast fashion industry affects not only people but the world at large is called The True Cost by the filmmaker Andrew Morgan. It's a fantastic documentary. So that's my little plug. Definitely, if you're more interested in it, go and watch that. But ultimately, for me, my viewpoint is that fast fashion is incredibly exploitative, from the workers to the consumption of resources to the overall waste, and something needs to change. So it's a microcosm. Like in a microcosm, let me say like jeans, for example. A pair of jeans takes about 2,000 gallons of water to make one pair of jeans.
Hmm.
And when you go into a secondhand retailer store, there's always jeans being given away. It doesn't make sense to me that brands are still making denim as an option for people to buy. And it's especially like if you're thinking about like denim jackets or like even shorts. Just go to the store, go to the secondhand store, buy a pair of jeans and cut the pants off. In my mind, there's no reason for us to continuously make this specific garment that really is very detrimental to the environment. Just to throw a couple of facts out, because I think about this all the time. It's estimated that 80 to 150 billion garments are produced annually, and
Hmm.
up to 50 billion go unworn. And about 90 million tons of clothing contributes to textile waste annually. So people buy around 50 new garments a year, and they really only wear about 19 of those.
Hmm.
So it's very wasteful, and this overconsumption and the shopping halls, it all really does play into the fast fashion industry at large. And, the way that you're producing garments, it really is just so wasteful. And then not even to touch on how bad it is for the garment workers, wage theft, unsafe working conditions, toxic dyes. So like, the documentary I was spoke about earlier really does touch on it in a more eloquent way than I could, but
Hmm.
it was a bit demoralizing after working in the fashion industry about 8 years is I think what I did. Consistently producing the same thing over and over and over again, and knowing that you're making so many garments, they just end up in discount retailers and then
Hmm.
secondhand stores and then the dump, and it's very sad. Yeah, it's not great for the planet. It's not great for the people, and it's not really necessary. Yeah.
So I do have a question for you, and this
Mhm.
is kind of a non sequitur, but we talk about clothing waste, you talk about upcycling, recycling things in
Mhm.
secondhand stores, but there are garments we wear that historically we don't know what to do with when they've reached the end of their life, such as undergarments,
Mhm.
socks.
Yeah.
Because secondhand stores aren't going to take things like that.
No, they
So,
don't.
so
Yeah.
what do you do with that?
I find that some people online I see will upcycle those bits and pieces. Like you can take the underwire out of a bra and reuse it for something else. You can take the hooks and eyes off and keep that for a different sewing project. So you can kind of harvest these items so that way you could reuse at least pieces of it.
Hmm.
A great way too is like turning it into what we call cabbage. So cut it all up into tiny little pieces, and you can make pillows out of it. You can make
Hmm.
stuffed animals out of it. You can put it into quilts as quilt stuffing. So I look to historical makers and how historically people would upcycle or reuse or create longevity within their clothes and sort of kind of figure out a way to do that. One person I saw on social media goes to secondhand stores to buy sweaters and will unravel them to reuse the yarn. And I thought that that was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's creative ways to do that, but it's also about getting creative about how you're harvesting it. Yeah, as well.
Sure. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So you've said that I'm quoting you here, costume design isn't just pretty dreams and pretty people. It has incredible depth to it. Tell us more about this.
Oh, this is the hill I will die on.
Okay, we found the hill.
Yes. So I feel like initially when I say, "Oh, I'm a costume designer," sometimes people's reaction is like, "Oh, that's great. It must be so fun." And you're like, "Of course it's fun. I love what I do." But there's also this great depth to it. So in essence, costume design is about storytelling and telling a story about a character. And good costume design will support whatever that story is. And the performer, once they walk into a costume, there's a moment where they light up and you can just see that character coming to life. Um, I feel like as humans, how we dress showcases a lot to the outside world, how we feel about ourselves that day or how we want others to feel about us. And this can directly influence what we wear. Sometimes if I'm not feeling so great, I'm putting on my favorite pair of sweatpants and they make me feel good. Or sometimes I put those same sweatpants on and it doesn't make me feel that great, you know?
Hmm.
So how clothing can influence both your emotions, but also tell people subconsciously or subliminally a little bit about yourself. Um, so that's sort of what you're striving for as a costume designer. There's a real psychological element to it. And, historically, how we used clothing was to showcase our status or our cultural ties. So that's why when you see a king walk on stage, you kind of immediately know because of the amount of wealth that they have on their body. They have placed themselves visually above others. And that helps tell that storyline. So I think that clothing in general is a language, and it intrinsically ties into that storytelling. And then on top of that, so that's like your theoretical side of design. But then on top of that, the practical side of it is, in the film industry, you're working insane hours, somewhere up to 70 hours a week, which can be incredibly taxing on the body, your emotions, your mentality. But there's also a significant amount of research that goes into costume design, clothing sourcing, whether that's purchasing clothing to then dress character or making clothing. So you're sourcing trims, fabric, all of the accoutrements that go into it. You're doing fittings, you're doing pattern making and tailoring and draping. There's altering, there's laundry, lots of laundry, always laundry. You also have specific artists that come in to do distressing or aging down the costumes. And you also have to transport all of this, either whether it's to or from fittings or to and from set, to and from different locations. You could be filming on the beach and need to have an entire rack of clothing. It definitely can be a physically taxing job as well.
Hmm.
So I like to tell people, I'm like, it's not just pretty clothes. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And it's really interesting because the audience is only supposed to see that 1%, that final moment when the costume arrives on screen or
Hmm.
on stage. And that is part of the job, is keeping that magic behind the curtain because you want that wow factor.
Hmm.
And it's really that 99% of the work that people generally don't get to see, which is why I personally love to see behind the scenes footage of really anything. I'm like, tell me more, tell me how it was all made, tell me everything. I want to know it all. But yeah, it's a lot of hard work. And I think everything can be hard work, and
Hmm.
it's nice that at the upfront it looks sparkly. And if people think it looks sparkly, then I've done my job right. I don't want when a character comes out on stage for someone to go, "Oh my God, that's so much work," or "What is that?" Pulls them out of that moment. And it's important that the audience stays in that magical moment.
Well, we're going to take this even a step farther because your
Mhm.
resume has an amazing breadth and depth to it.
Oh,
You've,
thank you so much.
oh my goodness, you do theater, film, TV, fashion design. Are there any of these that you particularly enjoyed the most, and why?
I wouldn't say that there's maybe one avenue that I enjoy more than the other, but there's like specific moments in each. Like, as much as I loathe fast fashion, I look at fashion design or couture or those higher levels of design that keep, historical techniques alive is so important and so inspiring. That highest level of craftsmanship is really exciting to see. And then there's moments where, in theater, for example, a costume will walk on stage and oh my goodness, you can feel the way that the audience shifts. And that is electric. It really is just, there's no other, there's a feel, there's just like, it's difficult to describe that feeling. And it feels like you're like, oh, this moment, I made this moment happen. This is so exciting. And for film, one of my big things is I work a lot with background actors. So we'll go through a series of fittings and you'll see people individually, right? And then there's the moment when everyone's come in, they're all in hair and makeup, and you've transported everyone to set. And you look around and you've got 100 actors in historical clothes, just head to toe, and it transports you. It's so exciting to see everyone there in costume in this moment, and it just feels electric. So there's little moments in each that I think I really love, and I wouldn't say I love each sort of I think of like clothing design and fashion design as like one large corporation. Each thing's a division. There's things I love about each, and there's things I don't love about each. So yeah, but I do love those magical moments. Yeah.
Now you talked about background actors, and
Mhm.
I've seen things where people like me, I can sign up to like walk across the street in a
Yes.
scene, and you have to put me in costume, and yet you
Mhm.
also work with the headline actors in a
Mhm.
production. Is it different to work with someone, whose name we might know all the time versus working with me walking across the street because you have to costume both of us?
I like to treat everybody the same, whether someone's an A-lister or someone's a background actor for the day. I think it's really important to maintain a professional level, to also make that day exciting because when people are uncomfortable or unhappy, it really catches on camera. So, and I like to also remember like, I'm here every day, but maybe this person is here for one day, or they're only here filming a couple of scenes, or they're doing, or this is like their main thing and they're the main actor of it. I like to just kind of think like, this is the professional environment. We're keeping it positive and everyone's going to have a great time because we're creating something so fun. We have the weirdest job in the world. It is different though in the demands of the day and the demands that are asked of the actors. So, a main actor could be on set maybe 3 or 4 times a week or there every single day. It just depends on the demand of the script. And same thing with your background actors. You could have a very background heavy film, like maybe it's a war movie or a movie with a lot of pedestrian scenes and you only really see the main actors a couple of times. So it really depends on the script
Mhm.
and what those daily demands would be like. But I do like to kind of make putting somebody into costume a safe and special place for them, whether they are an A-lister or somebody who found us through a Facebook ad and wanted to try it out for the day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about this in general.
Yeah.
Can you share any specific special stories about working on any of the films or TV shows or theatrical productions you've done? Any kind of behind the scenes story for us?
I feel like it's one of those questions where I'm like, yes, I have so many stories,
Yeah.
and then I completely blank.
Oh,
But
sure.
I can tell one of my first costume jobs was I was working at the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey. I was going to Drew University as an undergrad, and I needed some extra cash, so I was helping out in the wardrobe department. And I went in one day, and they were doing Amadeus, and they made a with yeah, they made a beautiful jacket for the main actor. And they must have spent about a week and a half, 2 weeks making this coat. In the play, he sits in a wheelchair for mostly the whole show. He's on stage the whole time. And so it's a very significant costume. Well, they made it to his specifications. It was beautifully designed. And they handed it to me with a wire brush and said, go destroy this and make it look really, really, really old.
Mhm.
And I was like, are you sure about that? Like, are you absolutely sure you want me to go destroy this garment that you spent so much time making? And that was an aha moment where I didn't realize that that was a job that somebody could do. And that it's also a very important job because not all clothing is brand new. A lot of the clothing that we wear could be hand me downs, or in this specific storyline, he just looked like he had been living in an attic for years. And I remember the stitchers were like, you have to do that, but we can't see it. Like, please take it
Oh.
away from us. We're too emotionally attached. And I was like, I don't know what's happening, but okay, I'll go do this. And then on the last show I just worked on, I just finished filming up in Pittsburgh on a new movie about the man who invented the Hershey chocolate bar.
Mhm.
And what was fabulous about this was the team was just, oh my goodness, the best team to work with. Everyone was so respectful and kind and excited to be there. And the costumes ranged from the 1860s, 1870s ish, up until the late 1910s. And we had almost 1,500 background actors on this film. And it was just magnificent to see all these costumes and to see them come to life and have days where we had like 150 background all dressed in costume. It's just one of those moments you kind of pinch yourself. You're like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, this is a real thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really cool. And especially as a costumer, and if you love historical fashion, you go into these costume shop and the rental shops. And sometimes you pull out a hat and you're like, oh, Harrison Ford wore that. Okay, I'm going to put that back. Or like, you're like, not for this film, but okay. Or like you go through things and you see historical garments that belong in a museum. Emotionally, I'm like, that belongs in a museum, but we're going to put it on a person and we're going to send it off on camera. And so it's really cool to be able to see these garments have all of this extra life in them, which I just love that part of it. Yeah.
And speaking of productions you've worked on, we were talking before we started recording
Mhm.
that you have actually worked with one of our previous guests on this podcast.
Yes, Jennifer May Nickel. She's
Hmm.
amazing. Yes, she went to Carnegie Mellon a couple of years before me, and she was my big and my mentor. And we've always sort of crossed paths and kind of checked in. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was in LA, but she was filming in Atlanta. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm coming back to Atlanta. She's like, I'm going back to LA. So we've been trying to work on things together for a while. And then when she got the call to work as the costume designer for Gotham Knights, she called me and asked if I could be the age or dyer craft artisan on the show. And it was just a magical experience
Hmm.
getting to finally work with her in a really cool way and to support her dreams and to support her designs. It was so much fun. And then also to like, make things that are part of the DC canon, like Batman, please.
Oh,
Yes.
sure.
Oh, yeah. Say less.
So we're going to switch topics here just a little bit. Your undergrad degree is in art history, so you have a very great appreciation for the stories behind things in the present. In fact, you shared with us that the oldest sewing needles date back, and I didn't know this, 50,000 years.
Yeah, yeah, pretty cool.
What does this fact mean to you? It seems like it's important.
It's something that when I first discovered that fact, I was like, wow, kind of need to sit down for a second because I feel like it's such a beautiful bridge between the present and the past. In the act of picking up a sewing needle and threading it and putting it through a piece of fabric, you are literally doing the same physical act as somebody thousands of years ago. And the sewing needle has not really changed. It was made out of bone, and now it's made out of metals. Now we have every different kind of sewing needle that you can think of, from leather to curved hat needles to silk needles to sewing, all the different kinds of sewing needles. And I just think it's one of those things where you kind of just sit down and you're like, if you really think about it, it's actually pretty wild, and you kind of become a little bit of a time traveler when you're hand sewing. Yeah, and having my art history degree has kind of given me this really great sense of, I like to call it the study of history social media, because
Hmm.
you're really studying how people historically wanted to present themselves, which is basically, a painting is kind of like a selfie, and in the way you're presenting yourself in a specific way and how you want people to see you. And clothing has significant cultural history, from where was that fabric initially created to how was that fabric found in this country. It showcases trade and a cross share of culture, and how we have figured out, pattern making and draping. And I think draping on the bias wasn't really a thing until like the 1920s, 1920s, I believe. And so just the innovation of clothing evolution is fascinating to me. And then, you sit down and you think, oh, the sewing needle has been around for quite a long time. People were sewing pelts together in a cave. I think that's fascinating.
Taking that a step further, putting all this together, you enjoy analyzing how people communicate through clothing. You kind of alluded to this earlier. What have you learned?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite things. Like, it's like the sociology or anthropology of clothing. What I've learned, I think, and it's also in conjunction with the significant amount of traveling I got to do growing up, is that in some ways, humans across the board, we're all the same. We as humans want to be seen or we want to hide, and our choice of clothing really helps us do that. I personally love the cultural language of clothing. Like I said, like for example, the color purple, like the reason that purple is associated with royalty is because it was such an expensive dye. It comes from the Tyrian mollusk shells, and to go through the process, you have to boil thousands of them to get like an ounce of dye. So it was very, very, very important to past cultures, and especially before we had the synthetic dyes. So that color was significant for royalty because they were really the only ones that could afford it.
Hmm.
So understanding that and then putting that into costume design, it really makes sense how that language has come about. I love the evolution of fabric making, like I said, the science behind fabric dyeing, the artistry behind every stitch, and the human element to that as well. When you open up a historical garment and you see these tiny little hand stitches, it's like, wow, somebody was sitting down and put a lot of work or heart or blood or effort or tears into this garment to make it, and it still exists today. I think that's really fascinating. And I think it's really important to celebrate that and to keep those traditions alive. A lot of craft is just not getting picked up by the younger generations. And so we're seeing a loss of this knowledge, which is very sad to me, whether it's tambour beading or cultural weaving or specific weaving to different types of cultures. It could be lace making, even pattern making and draping techniques. Like if you're looking at fast fashion, we've boiled everything down to a very basic shape, and everything has stretch in it. So the fitting process is very
Mm.
different than how it was back in the day, when you had to compensate for the lack of stretch in clothing, or how did people move? Everyone's like, oh, how do people move in corsets and all those skirts? And it's like, because the clothing still allowed them to do it. It
Mhm,
was,
mhm.
people had to live their lives in these things. So I feel like that knowledge that people have developed over the many, many, many years, passed down, these traditions that are passed down, I think they need to be kept alive and they need to be celebrated, and we can't lose that knowledge. So that's part of why I think I'm so fascinated with costume design and fashion design. It sort of connects you to this really human element of dressing ourselves.
Why do you think the younger generations aren't picking up some of these, crafts and traditions?
I think it's multifaceted, that issue. I think there's maybe a lack of desire to learn it because it doesn't really feed necessarily into the survival of every day. I feel like these traditions or these crafts or these techniques or sewing in general can be seen as sort of lesser than or women's work, or it's not really compensated in the way that it should be. Even to this day, like right now, like people don't understand the amount of work and time and energy it goes into making a garment. So the cost value of it, people don't want to to pay the proper price or the proper wage for it. I think that there's, a loss of a general desire to just kind of be connected to it. I am seeing though at the same time, like I say that I'm like, oh, I feel like people are not really that interested in learning these techniques. But then on the other side, I am starting to see, I think, a reach back into these more slower ways of making garments and keeping these traditions alive, and noting that this loss of culture, this loss of knowledge is devastating and it can't happen. So I do see people building up lace skills or going to weaving classes or really trying to keep the timbre beating alive. So I kind of see it's like a dichotomy. You see some people are picking it up and really keeping it alive, and some things are just sort of kind of going away. I think fast fashion has also contributed to a watering down of these techniques. Like I said, like the fitting process, for example, just of clothing, because we have so much stretch in it, it's not as specific. I think, on a higher level, you can't really afford 50,000 garments with hand beading, timbre beading. Like it is just not feasible in the way that we've built up the clothing system right now. I feel like some people, have moved away from these. They want to go off and be a doctor or a lawyer. They don't want to sit at home learning how to do the handcraft that doesn't pay as well. And I think that that's also a problem too, is that societally we maybe don't value these things as much as we should, both monetarily and culturally. But I also see at the same time, it's hard to say. It's like online, I see so many people picking up timbre beading or weaving or lace making, and I love to see that. And I love to see it in, high levels of fashion, like couture, like Schiaparelli or Alexander McQueen. These companies that still have those couture lines are keeping these crafts alive, which I think is very important. So it's sort of like a push and pull.
Sure, sure. Now, I talked in the introduction about
Mhm.
the fact that we can find you all over the U.S. What you're kind of everywhere. Why is that?
It's all freelance, so sometimes you got to go where the work is. Hollywood exists in California. Theater is very heavy in New York. You have regional theater all over the United States, and film and television and commercial work is kind of all over the US. So I don't like to close doors. I like to keep opportunities open. My unions are based in New York and Pittsburgh, and I'm always open to kind of working wherever the job needs me to go. For a couple of years there, I actually had all my stuff in a storage unit, and I was just following shows around and moving around the country, and it was amazing. But there's a time too to also settle down and kind of dig into one area. But yeah, I like to kind of be open with where my locations are, especially because I grew up that way, moving every
Hmm.
3 to 5 years. After a little bit of time, I get the itch to move again and experience something new. So I just kind of go with the whim.
What do you do in your spare time?
My spare time, I love to travel. I love to read. I like to watch movies or go out to eat. I like to do the Ren Fair. I've been getting into the cosplay community recently. There's quite a large one in Atlanta, which has been
Hmm.
fabulous. And to be completely honest, I'm kind of boring. I love to sew. I'm usually at my sewing machine. If I'm not making a costume, I'm talking about a costume or I'm
Sure.
sewing a costume. Yeah.
Well, speaking of making costumes, what are you working on now?
Right now, I am currently making a historically accurate lobster costume. So
A lobster.
lobster. I'm going to a Surrealist Ball November 8th. It's hosted by a company down in Atlanta called Met by Moonlight Events. And they do 4 fantasy balls a year. And the Surrealist Ball is just like so exciting. And obviously, Elsa Schiaparelli and Salvador Dali had a great partnership. And in 1939, they did the lobster dress that was featured on the front page of Vogue. I can't remember the woman who was wearing it, but it caused such a scandal. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to make a lobster dress. And the gown that I'm making, it's called a lobster tail bustle, very specifically popular in 1883 to 1885. And it literally looks like a lobster tail. So I was like,
Hmm.
perfect. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make a lobster hat. So yeah, I'm going to be posting about that on my social media soon. And I just finished making a Hollow Queen outfit for Halloween. I do a different royal, like queen inspired outfit every year. And then, yeah, I'm just sort of making some fun avant garde pieces to kind of fill out my time. And I like to keep my skill set alive, and I like to teach online and teach people how I'm making these things. So I try to keep it fun and, whatever the emotions feel.
Can you tell us what a Surrealist Ball is?
Yes, so it is hosted by a company here in Atlanta. They're named Met by Moonlight Events, and the Surrealist Ball is they do 4 fantasy balls a year. So this one is obviously around the Halloween time, spooky season. So the theme is surrealism, a surrealist soiree. So I am making a lobster gown in honor
Hmm.
of Elsa Schiaparelli and Salvador Dali. Yeah.
Wonderful. So after all this, what's next for you? And Jessica, what's your dream?
Oh, what a good question. Right now, I'm currently in between shows. So I really like to take advantage of the time off and spend it with family and friends and sort of working on the projects that are my personal passion projects. Like I mentioned before, when you're working on a film set, your hours can be up to 70 to 80 hours a week. And so at that point, you're really just not engaged in reality. You're just hyper fixated on the show that you're making. So when I'm off in between shows, I really like to just kind of enjoy my time off. And luckily for right now, my time off is coincided beautifully with fall season. So I'm getting to enjoy all the fun fall things. And yeah, I'm like, what else do I like to do between shows? I like to make sewing content and, like I said, design content on social media. So you will usually find me in my studio, kind of just creating videos and talking to people about the industry, how to get into it, mentorship, all of those kinds of things. And like my big dreams, it's kind of, I count myself very lucky. One of my big dreams was to work on a movie in California, and I got to do that. I've always joked like, after every show, I'm like, wow, that was such an amazing experience. I could retire right now. I feel very blessed to have had the career and have the career that I have. I'd love to continue working in the film and television industries. I'd love to see my career grow further. I like working in all aspects of the costume department, but one day I would love to win an Oscar or a Tony or a BAFTA for Best Costume Design. But I also would love to make downloadable patterns. I have some beautiful historical clothing that I would love to pull patterns from and make those available to people. I'd love to teach. Yeah, I feel like the sky's the limit. When you mentally limit yourself, you're limiting your opportunities. So I like to stay open to really anything and say yes to anything that really sparks joy.
We have a lot to look forward to from you.
Oh, thank you so
We
much.
do. In our conversation today, we talked about a lot. Is there any
Yes.
question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
Oh man. You know what? I'll tell people if you really want to get into the film industry, you got to love camping because most of the time you're outside in the elements. So that's always my little joke whenever someone asks, like, oh, should I get into film? Should I get into TV? I'm like, how much do you like the elements outside? And do you love being outdoors for 12 hours a day?
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything right now, but I'm always available to anybody if they have questions. There were so many people that helped me have the career that I have. I feel like it's very important to pay it forward and pay it back. So I like to be available if anyone has any inquiry.
And how do our listeners reach out to you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Social media, I'm on really all platforms under at Jess Cronin Designs, and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Patreon. I've got it all. It's too
Perfect.
much to handle, but I've got it all.
Perfect. Jessica, this has been so much fun. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure and a true honor to be on the podcast. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to mag@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.